Well, at long last, episode 35 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, Don't Chase a Shadow, debuted perhaps the most anticipated Bankai of the arc, and considering the Bankai that are even yet still to come, that is saying something. But it's Kyoraku Shunsui's Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju, in a stunning display of the Captain Commander's power against Lille Barrow, seemingly ending the fight by obliterating the sternritter's head. Kyoraku Shunsui is my favourite captain in Bleach, if you don't count Aizen, and Katen Kyokotsu is my favourite Zanpakuto, so naturally this is a very exciting milestone moment of the series for me, and many others. But while it's fantastic to finally see this long-awaited Bankai in the anime, it isn't the most clear-cut ability in Bleach. In fact, it can feel like quite the opposite. Kyoraku's Bankai is a mysterious, abstract, and whimsical power that is drenched in imagery and themes. In his Bankai, Kyoraku forces both himself and his opponent to take part in a 4-act theatre performance that eventually leads to demise. But it's not the most transparent of techniques, so today I wanted to dedicate what I imagine will be a fairly short video to the Bankai itself, taking a look at exactly what it does and how it works. Is it really a guaranteed kill? Is there no escaping Kyoraku's theatre of death? 3 years ago, and I have no idea how it's been that long by the way, I made a video looking at Kyoraku's Bankai in a similar fashion. Now though, we have also the anime and the changes made there to consider, as well as some interesting morsels dropped by Kubo himself in the years following, so I'm hoping this will provide fans with a more complete and up-to-date package on the Bankai itself. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you enjoyed this video when you're done with it and you want to see more from me and stay up to date with the channel, then make sure to hit subscribe now. I really do appreciate the support. So, the first and perhaps most important question is, what does Kyoraku's Bankai actually do? How does it work? Do the 4 distinct acts on show throughout this sinister performance link together? And if so, how? What initially felt like a weird and disjointed Bankai when it was first revealed way back in the day has slowly come to be appreciated more and more, I feel, especially the artistry behind it. In order to find out more about the inner workings of Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju, let's dive into the Bankai itself, taking a look at how it unfolds in real time, starting with the release. After pointing both blades towards the ground and activating his Bankai, a peculiar shadow appears behind Kyoraku, seemingly embracing him. At the same time, a net of jet black pine needles extends from underneath him, creeping across the ground as though painted by an ink brush. In the anime, an aura is released from Kyoraku himself, coating the entire surrounding area in an ethereal golden glow. As a pulse washes over the battlefield, the very skyline of Varvelt itself is painted in an intricate design of golden swirls and spirals, while the sky transforms, becoming the segmented golden backdrop of a traditional Japanese kabuki theatre. As the pine trees spread along the floor, a distinctive yaw sound rings out. In kabuki theatre, this sound is used to announce the arrival of a character into the play. Presumably here, it's to designate Kyoraku himself upon the activation of his Bankai, the creation, the opening of the play, and perhaps the appearance of Katen as well, who at this point appears as the shade clutching the captain. This transformative effect covers an immensely wide area. Despite Kyoraku saying he doesn't want anyone to be caught up in it, in the anime at least, it looks as though much of the Gotei 13 is at the very least swept up in the changing reiatsu that paints the Quincy city from top to bottom, though I assume they are not explicitly involved in the Bankai itself. The anime also seems to depict Varvelt shaking upon the release of Kyoraku's Bankai, though it's hard to know if that's anything more than a visual flourish. When Kyoraku at last reveals himself and approaches Leal, we see what looks like a connective branch vanishing from the captain's back. I assume this is meant to be the last of Ohana's shade dispersing into the air, as she's going to make her true entrance later. In terms of Bankai releases, this is absolutely one of the most elaborate in the series, with a widespread area of effectability that rivals Yamamoto's own. I kind of like that all of the elder captains have Bankai that initiate these area of effect passive changes upon activation. In the anime, we saw that Unohana's drenched the entire arena in blood, turning the entire battlefield crimson, and I've always liked to speculate that Ukitake's Bankai would create a torrential rainstorm, but we've never seen it, so it's only a guess on my part. Kyoraku wonders if the world seems different to Leal now, asking if the sky seems darker and whether he feels lonely and hopeless as a result. After this, we progress to the Bankai's first act, as Leal attempts to attack Kyoraku. As mentioned earlier, Kyoraku's Bankai forces the captain and his opponent to both take part in a 4-act performance, much in the same way as Kyoraku Shikai takes the hands of both Kyoraku and his enemy by force, as explained by Kyoraku in this very battle, dragging them both into a series of children's games. Act 1, called Tamurai Kizu no Waka Chiai, is fairly simple. Any wounds sustained by Kyoraku prior to the activation of his Bankai are then shared with his enemy. In the case of Leal, this ability even works if the enemy can't be harmed by conventional methods. Leal suffers from the exact same injuries he himself gave to Kyoraku earlier, and in this case that's a sniper shot to the side and a sniper shot through the shoulder. Kyoraku notes, however, that one can't die from these wounds. The idea, I think, is that the two characters in the play are meant to be sharing their pain, and this is a very literal interpretation of that. In our performance, the two characters here are a man and his scorned partner. In this instance, Leal will be playing the part of the man, while the combination of Kyoraku and Katen will be playing the part of the scorned partner. Kyoraku then moves swiftly onto Act 2, Zanki no Shitone. As he narrates, a man who regrets wounding his adversary falls to the floor from shame and suffers an incurable sickness. Leal's body is suddenly covered from head to toe in horrible, sickly black spots, which begin to bleed heavily. Blood also pours from every orifice on Leal's body, bursting from his nose and eyes as well. Clearly, in the split-second moment he received his shared wounds from Act 1, Leal maybe subconsciously regretted injuring Kyoraku in the first place, forcing Act 2 to begin. Perhaps if the enemy remained resolute in the face of the shared injuries of Act 1, the Bankai wouldn't progress any further. It's hard to know for sure, again, that is just speculation on my part, but it seems to make sense. In the context of the performance, Leal, the man, regrets wounding his partner and falls ill from the shame. Act 3, Dangyo no Fuchi, is perhaps the act that feels the most like it comes out of nowhere. Both combatants find themselves plunged deep into a watery abyss. In the context of the story given to us, the two lovers decide to throw themselves into the water to end their lives together. In the battle, both Leal and Kyoraku now find themselves at the mercy of the crushing sea as it begins to drain both of their spiritual pressures. Eventually, one will run out. Instantly terrified upon being submerged beneath the ice-cold water, Leal tries to escape by flying towards the surface, only to find it getting further and further away from him. Because what's done is done. Whether he likes it or not, Kyoraku's Bankai has made him an integral part of this story that must be seen through to the end now. So, Leal has a part to play, and that means he can't simply leave the stage, he can't leave the watery depths. Kyoraku notes that he does understand how Leal feels though. The moment they hit the freezing water, their resolve is tested. Here, we witness the final stage of Kyoraku's Bankai. His Zanpakuto spirit Katen appears behind him, though she doesn't materialise to the naked eye, as Leal can't see her. Instead, wrapping her arms around Kyoraku, it's as though both she and he take on the role of the scorned partner in order to finish things off once and for all. With Leal originally turning his back on Kyoraku and attempting to escape the water, Kyoraku calls him selfish and disgraceful. The idea here is that Leal's character regrets his actions. Though they swore to die together by throwing themselves into the water, he tries to escape, but the scorned woman has no time for him anymore. As Kyoraku says, she has no ear to lend to a petulant man. In one final act, Kyoraku's character decides to kill her pathetic partner by cutting his throat, ridding him of his regrets. Act 4, Itokiri Basimi Chizume no Nodoboe sees Kyoraku sheath his swords and deliver a woman's cruel pity upon his foe. He draws a white thread symbolising Leal's regret that wraps itself around Leal's neck almost like a noose of sorts. Darting past his enemy in one swift move, Kyoraku cuts Leal's throat, the anime depicting this last action as a beautiful watercolour painting. The red of the slash going across Leal's neck extremely potent against the white backdrop. With the performance completed and the story now told, the gaping wound in Leal's throat swells and expands before exploding, completely obliterating not only his head, but his entire upper body, sending the sternritter plummeting to the darkness below. And so that is Kyoraku Shunsui's Bankai, for a character who, at least in terms of leadership, has been defined by his progressive and unorthodox nature. His Bankai feels inherently traditional, not just in its depiction of the performance, but in its vicious, violent, and uncompromising nature. It appears the Bankai takes inspiration from the Japanese play The Love Suicides at Sonezaki, not just in its name, as Kyoraku's Bankai also shares a similar naming convention in Bones of Heavenly Blooming Madness Withering Pine Lover's Suicide, but also in the narrative itself, with the play ending with the two lovers' double suicide beneath the pine tree. Moving on, let's talk briefly about the differences in the way the anime and the manga present the Bankai itself, the biggest being during activation. In the manga, when Kyoraku activates his Bankai, the entire surrounding area is plunged into a suffocating darkness that amplifies feelings of gloom, melancholy, and despair. In that sense, it felt like the total opposite of the face Kyoraku often presented to the world, and a reflection of his hidden darkness lingering within. The manga featured a number of reactions from various characters. Ganju, shivering, thought that the world around them fell cold and dark all of a sudden, but Chad noted that in actuality, neither of those things had really happened. It was illusory, and the Bankai was actually giving them the chills, a prickly feeling of sinister unease that causes the hairs on the back of your neck to stand on end. Orihime too notes that although she can't see or hear anything that would make her feel this way, she simply can't stop trembling. The anime's version of the Bankai removes the sensations of dark and cold, although it keeps in the imagery of Orihime and Chad experiencing the chills, instead going in much the opposite direction. The entire surrounding area is lit up with a brilliant golden gleam, and the buildings and cityscape are painted with an intricate pattern of light. Interestingly, both versions have Kyoraku asking Leal if the world feels dark and depressing, which no longer really makes sense in the anime's version. However, the anime version also expands the number of characters that sense Kyoraku's Bankai being activated. Almost the entire Gotei 13 seems to feel that dark power wash over them, as well as characters like Yoroichi and Grimjo. So that's essentially what the Bankai does. Kyoraku leads his opponent through a 4-act performance that ends in the opponent's seeming certain death. In that sense, this is an immensely dangerous Bankai, and yet one that it still feels like we are missing a lot of information on. Is this the only performance Kyoraku's Bankai can enact, or are there others? Does the theatre production change depending on the circumstance, or can Kyoraku decide in the moment which to use? For example, knowing he couldn't injure Leal conventionally, did he choose a narrative that he thought would certainly result in Leal's death? Another question remains. Is there any means of escaping this Bankai for the chosen victim? Or was Leal simply doomed from the moment Kyoraku activated it? If it's the latter, then that is crazy, but there is more to it than that. It definitely feels like, and this is my own speculation, that there are potentially multiple ways out throughout the narrative if the opponent is capable enough. For example, Act 2 only seems to begin if the enemy regrets injuring Kyoraku due to them sustaining wounds themselves in Act 1. But if the enemy didn't feel regret at all, would the performance simply come to a stop? The same goes for Act 3. If the enemy didn't regret their actions and try to escape the water as their resolve plummeted, would Act 4 fail, meaning Act 3 then carries on endlessly until one of the two fighters runs out of Reiatsu. Presumably, even if the opponent somehow circumvents their role in the story has to perhaps continue. Maybe that is what would lead to Kyoraku's eventual death. The fact Kyoraku mentions that Act 3 will continuously drain their Reiatsu sounds to me like the Bankai plans for a much longer fight than what we saw play out. And if that's the case, then surely any opponent with more Reiatsu than Kyoraku that isn't affected by Act 4 will be able to overcome the Bankai and potentially win. And so I wonder if the moment the two of them hit those icy cold waters and their resolve began to shake, if from the moment Kyoraku saw Leal attempting to escape, he kind of knew it was already over. Interestingly, in a question posed to his Club Outside Q&A platform, Kubo was asked what would happen if Kyoraku's opponent didn't put up a resistance come Act 3, which is exactly what we just talked about. Would the Bankai simply come to an end right there? Unfortunately, it kind of feels like Kubo maybe misread the question, as he provides a totally different answer, albeit one that is still very interesting. Kubo notes that if the opponent simply dies midway through any of the Bankai's acts, it is assumed that the performer has disappeared, and yes, the Bankai comes to an end right there and then. Anyway, that's it for our video on Kyoraku's Bankai Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju. It was extremely exciting, once again, to see this Bankai finally brought to life in the anime, to see how it differed from its portrayal in the manga, and I have to say that I was, on the whole, very, very happy with how they chose to do it. There are still a few questions left to be answered. For example, another one I just thought of is, what would happen if Nanao was caught up in Kyoraku's Bankai, as he does seem to worry about that potentially happening? However, the story involved here only seems to have two main characters, so would either Kyoraku or Leal's character be substituted for Nanao, and one of them removed from the Bankai's effects? I've got absolutely no idea. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below as to how you think that might work. How do you think it's possible to escape Kyoraku's Bankai, or is it impossible altogether? Are you doomed the moment you find yourself captured, ensnared by the Bankai's performance of death? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts surrounding Kyoraku's Bankai, how it works, if there was anything I missed, and how you felt about its portrayal here in episode 35 of the anime, down in the comments below. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without whom I simply wouldn't be able to keep doing this. I really appreciate each and every one of you so very much, and if you too want to go that extra step further and support me over on Patreon, you can do just that. By supporting me at the $1 tier, you can get your name in the credits of every single video just like this, and at the $2 tier or higher, you can get every single video I release absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Okay guys, thank you again so very much for watching. I hope you took something of value away from this video today, and until next time I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.